Greetings, everyone. I am Mamme. This is Independent Voice. I have the author, Rasmus Sonderriis. I'm so grateful that you are here today with us to continue talking about this book that you published recently.
Thank you so much.
Absolutely. And I also have Hermela back again to have this discussion focused once again on the book itself. Do introduce yourself, tell us as much as you want to, and then tell us what inspired this book and why the name, how the title came about, and then we'll continue from there.
Okay, thank you very much. Well, I came to Ethiopia 2004 in my late 30s. I'd been writing about Latin America, living in Chile, although I grew up in Denmark. And I made a ton of friends, and I've been in close touch with Ethiopia ever since. Maybe I've lived half the time. And my friends, they were, I would say, sort of normal Ethiopians from all walks of life, right? Not elite Ethiopians, not the top generals, people from all the ethnic groups, right? So that's kind of my background. I didn't write about politics back then because it could get me deported if I told the press about the real feelings of the people towards the regime. So I wrote about adoption, about cultural issues, tourism, the millennium celebrations, all kinds of stuff. And then the war began in 2020. And I just assumed that the West, the kind of society, model society for most of us, with democracy, human rights, and free market economics, that they would support Abiy Ahmed because he was a reformer, he was liberal-minded. Of course, he was not perfect. Ethiopia has an authoritarian political culture. It takes a long time to build a democracy, but I just assumed that the old Stalinist guard would be condemned and Abiy Ahmed and his multi-ethnic government would be supported. We all knew about the rumbling of the TPLF, the old war horses from Tigray. I thought they were like a dying breed. I didn't think they would go to war, but never underestimate how much TPLF overestimates itself. That was one lesson. So the war began, and then these atrocity reports came out, and of course I felt embarrassed, right? Because I know that people in Addis Ababa don't have a ill will towards their Tigrayan neighbors, relatives, colleagues, but then people would say, well, you don't know about the countryside, right? Suddenly this became an ethnic war, and that seems strange to me, because to me it was a political war for power. It was like the dying last gasp of the TPLF trying to hold on to the military, to the economy, opposing these corruption trials that were going on, these anti-torture trials. And so it didn't make sense to me that there would be any controversy, even though of course you can condemn Ethiopia for heavy-handed methods, for not following international humanitarian law, but nobody could be in doubt who had to win this war, right? Because if Ethiopia loses that war, it would just become a failed state. It would be divided into statelets. It would be a complete disaster. Anybody could tell that. Even some of the people I expose as villains in my book, they would admit that. And on the other hand, if Ethiopia won, I mean, you always have to make that calculation. What happens if one side just stops fighting, right? Mm. And if TPLF stopped fighting, maybe some of the senior bosses would go to prison for corruption and torture, and they would be purged from the military. But in the end, Tigray would be reincorporated into Ethiopia. It would have facilitated a lot of things, right? And one of the arch villains in my book, Kjetil Tronvold, he just said a few days ago that actually that was a viable option. But they said that, if Tigray stops fighting, there'll be no more Tigrayans. We said, come on, who believes that? Oh, but if Ethiopia stops fighting, there'll be peace. No, there won't be peace. That'll just be the beginning of all these ethnic militias slugging it out. They would fight over the capital, what even to call it, would it be Finfinna, Addis Ababa? It was just inconceivable that the world would want 125 million refugees from Ethiopia. But then as the time went on, my Ethiopian friend was saying, look, the West is supporting TPLF. I said, no, they're not. You're getting confused, maybe they're not supporting you as much as they should, but they're not really supporting the TPLF, come on, And then we came to October and they were marching towards Addis Ababa. And there was no solidarity with Ethiopia. It was just like, oh yeah, they shouldn't attack Addis Ababa, but also they shouldn't defend Addis Ababa. Don't mobilize for militia. Abiy was censored for Facebook for mobilizing people to defend the capital against a pretty hated enemy. The special envoy from the US talked about a bloodbath situation in Addis Ababa, and there was no reaction, just let's evacuate. CNN even said it was a done deal. Then they began to say, oh, it's over. TPLF has won, decisive victory, it's over. And this really shocked me, it rocked me to the core. And that's when I decided I had to write something. I wrote the first thing called Do Good as Doing Bad. And that was sort of a report. And then as it went on, and I had to question my own model of reality, because I was right about the war, right? I knew that TPLF would lose in the end. I was always right about it. I always predicted the war correctly, but I mispredicted the Western reaction. So I had made a mistake, right? That in my model of reality had to be revised. So I began to think about how to explain this, because Ethiopians were confused about it, I was confused about it. And this sort of began maybe around August 2022, when the war was still going on. I began to write what I intended to be an article, and it ended up becoming a book, right, that I wrote over a full year. And the initial motivation was I want to change the narrative. I want to grapple with all these smears and libels against Ethiopia, all this overt politicization of accusations. I want to go into detail to read the report. But then, as time went on, I also wanted to explain how can the West go so wrong? Because I don't think, you could discuss, is the West stupid or evil, right? There were like the two camps. The West is evil. They felt vindicated because we are anti-imperialist. And it's funny for me because I'm a pretty mainstream guy. I'm not, I'm not anti-Western. I'm pro-Western when Western means pro-democracy, human rights, and equality, right? Otherwise, I'm not pro-Western. Right? I'm pro those ideals, which I think are universal. So, yeah, as time went on, I just needed to explain this. And of course, it's the hardest part of my book, right? Trying to explain what went wrong. But I think, of course, there's the TPLF. They had 27 years to put their people in high places around the world. They had Tedros Adhanom. They had all these people who had worked with the TPLF for 27 years. But also there is some pervasive, nasty superiority complex in the West that's just shocked me, right? It's when they say, oh, there's no military solution, like looking at Africans as savages. And Ethiopia has a very bad reputation for starvation and poverty and war and savagery and constant comparisons to Rwanda. And so I guess if I hadn't had the luck of living in Ethiopia for so long, I would have bought into that propaganda too. I think I would. I don't think I would have been able to see through the propaganda. The Economist, this is my favorite magazine for so many years. When they are saying it, oh, it's got to be true, right? But thankfully, I lived in Ethiopia for so many years, and this really opened my eyes. I could see it was clearly wrong when they were saying the Tigrayans are being grabbed out of the surgeon's operation room to be placed in warehouses, and if you're Tigrayan, you get arrested immediately. I know it's full of Tigrayan in Addis Ababa. I meet them every day. I talk to them. They were not even afraid of getting arrested, right? But some of them, of course, they were in a tight spot. You have to acknowledge that. You can understand their sense of vulnerability. You had to. I sympathize with that, right? Whether or not they supported the TPLF, suddenly they were being eyed up as infiltrators in a city that they've known all their life. Maybe they grew up in Addis Ababa. And I had to sympathize with that. But from there to say that Ethiopia was in the grip of tribal rage, no, it was not true. And it was a political war. I was right. It was not an ethnic war. That's what they tried to make it into, but it was essentially a power struggle. So, yeah, as I worked on the book, for a full year, I spent a lot of time meditating on how to present it in a way that is calm and credible, right? Mm-hmm. Because if I could come across as some crazy conspiracy theorist. Oh, who is this guy Rasmus who thinks he knows better than CNN and The Economist, and BBC and all these pundits and this and that. So first I had to find the people who made sense. People like Anne Fitzgerald, Bronwyn Bruton, also some Ethiopian analysts who had actually predicted what happened and had the correct analysis. When you predict something correctly, it shows you have a correct model of reality. And when you don't, it shows you have to revise your model of reality. So that's my first chapter. So that's one thing. Find the people who, were on our side. They didn't become so dominant in the media narrative, but they were there, right? And they were the ones who knew Ethiopia much better. So that was the first. And the second thing was just to turn down my anger and go into the detail, the nitty-gritty of reading all the reports. And then what I found actually shocked me even more, because it was just so shoddy, what they did. Some of these reports are so shoddy. I mean, and you can even plugging figures out of thin air that are impossible. And there was never any accountability. There was never any follow-up to some of these stories. Yeah, we can go into detail. I go into great detail. And what I pride myself on is I grapple with all the adversarial viewpoint, right? But if you read what they came out with, people like, the New Lines reports or the Amnesty reports, it's just a collection, even the UN ICRI report, yeah, International Human Rights Expert on Ethiopia, they just take all these media stories, and one media story refers to another, and then they ignore all the contrary testimonies, like Stephen Weramama, the World Food Program country director, the study made by Anne Fitzgerald, or the stuff I've written. They just ignore it because they have such a strong narrative going for them, so they don't need to grapple with any contrary viewpoints. But I had to do it. I had to go into every detail, right? Everything. Starvation, even rape as a weapon war, the most horrible things. I had to go into all of it. All these authoritative, moral authorities, I had to even try to find out what their motivations were, right? That's a weak part of my book, you could say, because it's impossible to tell people's motivations, but at least I tried. I don't think I left any page unturned. Of course, I'm just one guy, right, with a laptop. I don't have the resources of the United Nations, and still I don't get basic translations error. I don't get basic translations wrong. For example, the ICRI saying that Wayane is a slur for Tigrayans when it's in the name of the TPLF, even both in Amharic and Tigrinya. I don't make these basic mistakes that they do, having millions of dollars at their disposal. So yeah, I'm really happy I did it. It didn't make the impact that I would hope, but I think I've planted a fist in the face of all these big media. Also some of the diplomacy, definitely in big media, and they try to ignore it, and they will, but now at least the book is there, and people can read it and judge for themselves, yeah.
Right. So I did read the book. For anybody who's interested in capturing this book, I strongly recommend that you do. The timing is incredible. I'm grateful. I had a chance to get a copy of this book, and thank you, Hermela. She's the one that led me to it. I was so excited to get it. I got it. I started reading it. So part 3 of your book, and the reason why it was captivating to me at this point is that we were talking in recent weeks. We were talking about agenda setting narratives and the power of those narratives when they are weaponized to mean something. The purpose of agenda setting, the impact of narratives, as we continue to talk about those, maybe one phrase, one word, one sentence, whatever it may be, it does have a lasting detrimental impact. And you've dedicated a very large part of your book, which is part 3, in how the narrative was being set. I'll give you a lead on what I thought was quite intriguing. I mean, for those of us who were in the midst of it, it's not a new thing. But for somebody who maybe not followed this thing closely, it's quite interesting. For example, to this day, we were talking about genocide, right? The term genocide has become like a word that we toss every other sentence. And when the war broke out, the day of, right, the 4th,
Right, right.
Somebody or somebody's were already tweeting genocide. And
Yeah,
you
it was
stated
clearly
that in
prepared,
your
yeah.
book. You actually went as far as tracking down their Twitter accounts, what was
Yeah.
posted, and you have the dates to show.
Just nobody picked it up.
Nobody picked it up.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, Rasmus, he put it so well earlier. He said we have to keep watch and read between the lines because the TPLF camp, most of the time, they overestimate themselves. But meanwhile, on the Ethiopian camp, on the everyday, thank you for mentioning that, by the way, because it's not about the elite, it's not about the top military, it's the everyday people we're talking about now.
Right.
Yeah, so for the ordinary Ethiopians who were confronted in this situation where everybody was getting Ethiopia dead wrong, like you, we were faced with anger, with confusion, with lots of questions going on out. But especially the biggest problem that Ethiopians had, as much as the TPLF overestimated themselves, we underestimated them.
Absolutely, yeah.
Enormously. And where
Yeah.
we underestimated them, and when really it was a shock for me, like you also described it, I would mention a question, and it's like a question and answer on the web that I found about what you wrote. And I would like to, the people who are listening to this interview, is that it's important that the listener is completely in that atmosphere to understand what was really going on. And I think this question and answer describes very well the bridge in between the agenda setting and what was really going on. The so underestimated TPLF capacity and ability to for the agenda setting, and the international community and the institutions and the fraction of those Western big economy governments following the same narrative, how every drum was sounded at the same time against Ethiopia, and nobody gave Ethiopia not even a mic. Please tell us inside. So this, I think, this describes it very well. The question goes, they rank among the great and the good in our media, academia, humanitarian work, politics, and diplomacy. Yet, they demonized a friendly people and fueled a big war with dire mispredictions and shocking lies. So you predicted right because you were amidst the people. But then mispredicted from get-go.
Oh yeah, all the time, yeah.
With the agenda setting behind that backed it, that confirmed it, that guaranteed the miscommunication, that guaranteed the disinformation and fake media on Ethiopia with the drums of war to dismantle it. So who were they? We were like, who were they? How dare they? They say they are think tankers. They say they are academia. They say they represent the international nations, the UN. They represent all the nations of the world. But who are these people behind who are pushing this fake news? Because fake news has hit the mainstream now. How could they get away with it? Right? The questions you asked.
Yeah.
Who were they? How could they get away with it? What was the full picture that they so distorted, and why? What's the game? What's the game?
Right.
So you say there is no military solution, Western diplomacy droned on, but a military solution was exactly what Ethiopia sought when in October 2022, its army pushed back into the Tigray, the northern region, where an insurrection had begun and expanded out from. Some 2 years and countless lives earlier. So already there was a sacrifice that was paid. Halfway into the fratricidal war, the rebels had been closed in on the capital city and were hailed in the world press as the imminent victors. Everybody was saying, get out of Addis Ababa, they are closing in, they are coming in. Now Ethiopians became cautiously optimistic that the federal government would finally prevail with a prospect of stability. However, across the world, this site of the reef was drowned out by alarm ringing. So you go on to mention the UN, Antonio Guterres, and how all this narrative streamed through international mainstream media and international recognized people, leaders, and institutions were resound. So it's really very confusing moment, but to be anchored in how you described it, knowing the people, knowing their voice,
Right.
knowing who they are, it was like a light for me. And I mentioned it earlier, your book was like a gasp of air in my drowning water.
Thank you. Yeah, that's the beginning of the introduction, and it just shows that there's something that doesn't fit, right? That the Ethiopians are relieved, thinking now it's over, and the world, no, now it's just beginning. Now they're going to kill all the Tigrayans. They're going to murder every child, woman, and man. And yeah, so that's when you discover already there's something wrong, right? That surely the Ethiopians know their own country better than those international pundits or a lot of these institutions whose business model is to condemn human rights violations all over the world, right? It is a business model. Even if they don't have shareholders, that's how they draw a salary, that's how they get funding, is from condemning atrocities. And they thought they could virtue signal over Ethiopia, and they didn't know much about Ethiopia. You have like the Lemkin Institute for Genocide Prevention, I think they're called. They have a program, a podcast called Genocide News Today or something, and they talk. Then it's the Tigray genocide, then it's Amhara genocides, then it's a trans genocide. They can't even pronounce the names of Ethiopian towns and places, but it's like their business model, right? Is to come across as these do-gooders who save the world, but reality on the ground is something else, yeah.
Right, we have become consumers of those narratives.
And Ethiopia is in many ways like a poster child for the West charitable seal since this the Band-Aid concert, right? It's sort of etched into everybody's mind, and Ethiopia stands for poverty and despair and misery, and it appeals to people's charity, and so that's an image problem, and Ethiopia still struggles with, right, even today. We would like to present a different picture of Ethiopia, but it's true, though, that it's very poor still and has a lot of violent militias.
There is this disinformation already carved out, agenda setting, we'll get back to that, and the bias, right? So you buy in this disinformation, and please continue to describe how after your book came out, the book of Tom Gardner, because it was completely based on the disinformation, and we had the bias reporting straight out in our face.
Yeah. The funny thing, I had a friendly email conversation with Tom Gardner back in, I think it was October or November 2021, when and he said, "Oh no, the only way out is a new configuration of power, like a power sharing deal with the TPLF." And I said, "No, it's not the time, right? Ethiopia needs to mobilize, come together, and beat back these invaders. It's the only way, because there's no power sharing deal that would be acceptable or viable in the long term." So, and then the war ended the way I had predicted, contrary to the way he had predicted, but there was no reckoning, right? He continues to think that somehow the solution would just be pacifism. That's this thing about waxing pacifists when it's an African war. This is something really, really common. Yeah.
Sure, right.
Look at the Western response to the Ukraine war, right? We have an aggressor, we have the good guys, the bad guys, even if that's a bit crude. But no, for Africa, there are no good guys, right? They're all bad. It's not so difficult to see what Ethiopians we should show solidarity towards. We should be in solidarity with those who want a multi-ethnic state with coexistence. You can't divide Ethiopia now. It's way too late for that. The people live together in every single city. You can't divide Ethiopia into little ethno-states today. You can't do that. So we should support the people who want this multi-ethnic nation to work, and the moderate because there are extremists in all the ethnic groups, right? So, of course, we need to isolate them. We need the moderate from, especially the big ones, the Amhara and the Oromo, but also the Tigrayan, the Somali, all the moderates to come together and isolate the extremists. It's not so difficult, right? Even if Ethiopian politics seems a bit perplexing at first sight, because it's not so clear-cut left to right, and you have to understand different views of different interpretations of Ethiopian history is what behind the ideological differences. But this should be very clear, right? We should support those who want to build independent institutions, who have the patience for democracy and elections, to expand the democratic space, even if it's not as wide as we would like. And we should be against those who use violence in pursuit of power when there are alternatives, right? It's not so difficult.
Yeah. I think it takes political and social will to do that.
Yeah.
You know.
So now, for example, you have these press freedom organizations condemning lack of Ethiopian press freedom. And sure, I admit, maybe Ethiopia doesn't have the freest press in the world. It ranks very low on these official lists. But how about, what if these towns in the West, what if they had guerrilla soldiers lurking around, then raiding the cities every now and then and killing the mayor, killing the police chief, killing everybody they don't like, taking people for ransom, extorting people, and then they will draw. And then you have journalists glorifying that, saying, oh, that's wonderful, this is a fight for our existence. Would they have press freedom in the West? I don't think so. I think there would be a fierce reaction against that. So just put yourself a little bit into the shoes of Ethiopians, of the challenges, security challenges that they face. That's the least that you could ask of these organizations. But they seem uninterested. They just want to wax sanctimonious. Not saying that every single journalist arrested in Ethiopia is necessarily guilty of supporting a militia. But in the cases that I've looked into, yeah, that's basically it, right? It's at least that's a root problem. The root problem is the violence of these ethnic militias with all their grievances. Sometimes go back 100, 150 years, sometimes not so much. Maybe it has a grain of truth sometimes, but never justify violence, right? Yeah.
So yeah, I mean, even the systems, the institutions, the local institutions, they were not even able to make this freedom fighters accountable, right? We didn't even address the problem. So I'm sure you observed a certain pattern, right? A coverage pattern. Even knowing that Ethiopia is a multi-ethnic, diverse country, why would they come up all this, let's divide it, while it's impossible to do it? I mean, be scientific, be a little historian, or be a little even observant, you would understand right away that it wouldn't be possible. But they kept on, and since it's about not reporting something organic, it's about coming and imposing your narrative, there is a pattern, right? There is a pattern that was going on.
Yeah.
And mechanism of disinformation.
Very much the coverage focuses on it's this ethnic group against that ethnic group, and this has been historically marginalized. And but ethnic groups, they are very heterogeneous, right? They're so diverse in their political viewpoint, and usually it's the extremists against the moderates within each ethnic group. That's where the real fight is, right? It's the same, at least for the Oromos and the Amhara, the two big ones. That's very much the case, right? It's an internal Oromo fight, an internal Amhara fight. So that's why what you have to understand, it's not so simple as this ethnic group against that.
And this, romanticizing the fighters, making.
Oh yeah, romanticizing, yeah.
Romanticizing.
The oppressed people being marginalized and pushed, threatened by genocide. Yeah, especially these journalists that go into the bush with these fighters, and of course they don't know much about the history or the reality, and so yeah, they tend to romanticize. I've seen that with the OLA, the Roma Liberation Army, with Fano, and with the TPLF. Yeah.
Right. So kind of coming back to the agenda setting and the narratives discussions, and in listening to both of you talk about the patterns and why that took. Obviously, I think we live in a generation of technology. standing next to the truth is not that enticing anymore. We just talked about romanticizing what sells. I remember having a discussion with another journalist in this channel, and we talked about how we became consumers of anything, just anything. We don't necessarily ask questions. We don't do due diligence to find sources, weigh whether or not it's fact, it has any merit. We've become a direct consumers of what is being presented and what what grabs my attention, what do I want to hear. It has become to, if I have a stance and if I'm standing here and anybody and everybody that says anything that I feel as though is in support of where I stand, my opinion, or what I believe in, I'm not going to question that. I'm just going to go run with it. And the pattern from internal, external, the Western, even the African, the continent of Africa. I remember asking, where is Africa in all this? The continent of Africa. I mean, Ethiopia is having to face the most egregious kind of political, social, and then media struggle, right, for its existence. And it's being cornered into this space where it is having to run behind and never in front. That's how at least I saw it. Well, Ethiopia is always having to defend itself and never had the chance to stand in front of the narrative, because narratives are being just popcorned, It was like they were popping everywhere. You try to address one thing, before you know it, there are 10 more things. And what is selling, what is grabbing somebody's attention is, what you said it in the book, you said it today, is what tickles people's emotion, what grabs somebody's emotion. When you talk about starvation, when you talk about rape, when you talk about genocide, you talk about a humanitarian crisis, you talk about human rights and things like that. Who wouldn't want to know about that?
And you have to be very dramatic to draw attention to Ethiopia, right? Ethiopia is very, very low on the list of media attention priorities, right? So it's got to be something incredibly dramatic to draw attention.
Who's feeding what? So we're talking about Amnesty International, we're talking about social media, we're talking about different things. And I don't have to tell you where Amnesty International stands as of today in light of what's happening with USAID. I'm not going to get into that, but when you go back to it, you follow certain things, it takes you to the source itself, right?
Right. Well, this is another lesson I've learned, is that people are really opportunistic and lazy. I mean, top professionals in their fields, journalists, why are they so lazy? I mean, like Declan Walsh from the New York Times, he comes up with this theory, the war was planned a few months before. Well, there was a very, very long process of escalation. That was at least since Abiy Ahmed came to power in April 2018. And there are a lot of events along the way that he could have looked into. He could have looked at some of the people predicting the war as early as 2018, 2019. Lots of people predicting this war. And also people saying it wouldn't happen, right? So you study that. You look at the flashpoints in the road to war. He just came, I am the genius who found out that there was a secret pact between Eritrea. It was just so dumbed down, everything. And no patience to read the reports even. They just read the conclusions. Nobody goes into the nitty-gritty of. I go into the footnote. I check all the translations. I compare to what we know, and that's how I wrote my book, right? And also, I spend a lot of time listening to people I disagree with, right? I've listened to Kjetil Tronvoll maybe 25 hours. I've listened to him in Norwegian. I'm always listening to all these people, Alex de Waal. All the people that I disagree with, I listen to all of their output, because I need to understand, and I try to do it in good faith, right? People just don't have much patience.
No, we're just running with what sells and what, like I said, what tickles people's emotions. But go ahead, Hermela.
Oh, I was going to add just quickly, doesn't the bias come in handy, right? Painting, just paint. The whole nation is rapist. The whole nation is XYZ. Yeah. It just comes in handy. Yeah. But
well, that's again, a lot of these journalists, most of them, they've never lived in Ethiopia, right? There are some, like these pundits who know Ethiopia well, But even they tend to move in very elite circles a lot of the time. So I think that's my luck. I haven't moved in elite circle. I've moved in ordinary circles among pretty ordinary Ethiopians, from working class to middle class to sort of professional class. I write that I've immersed myself into Ethiopian society. I should qualify that because I didn't live on an Ethiopian wage. My Amharic is pretty basic, but at least I can hold a conversation with a taxi driver, an ordinary person, here talk about their lives, and I think maybe that's my luck that I've
And
had.
I think there's something to be said about differentiating between conversations between somebody who's sitting there, or somebody who has the knowledge, the background, or just a day-to-day experience and expressing their
Right.
emotions, expressing their opinions, versus some embellishment. The whole world is saying, "Oh, Ethiopia is going to, bloodbath. This is happening. Evacuate. Close embassies,
Yeah.
leave." All that. I remember it like it was yesterday, and I'm like, but the people in Ethiopia are saying, "We're not going anywhere. What are you talking
Right.
about? Where is this
Right.
coming from? What bloodbath are we talking about?" I have sat in meetings with representatives, and sometimes, obviously, themselves or their staffs, and the same sentiment has been discussed. We think this is going to happen. A group of us are trying to say, by the way, that's called propaganda.
Right.
That is called narrative.
Addis Ababa is going to fall in a matter of weeks, if not days. That was the cliche. And then one rep would go, well, in a matter of months, if not weeks, they said.
Right. That's all. That's always the qualifying.
In
statement.
Amharic,
Right.
in Amharic, we call that agenda gabu gabu.
So it brings me back why I was so excited to invite you, Rasmus, and actually put this out, because we're talking about the impact of agenda setting and narrative, the impact of it. Imagine if that energy was flipped over to turn it into putting out what's fact. Imagine setting agendas towards unity, towards peace, towards
Right.
integrity, towards what are we trying to gain? What is the end result? Imagine
Right.
what Ethiopia, Africa, and the rest of the world would look like. But no, what we have become once again is consumers of these things. What sells, what grabs somebody's attention. If the international attention is out there and somebody's flexing a muscle and saying, we're going to penalize you, we're going to sanction you, we're going to make it so hard for you to even do A, B, C, and D, and if we don't do this, your people are not going to be able to eat, things like that, using that strong muscle. So coming back to why I'm saying this is because it will continue. People will continue to set agenda.
Yeah.
People will continue to create narratives. Well, in the recent weeks, in the recent days, we've heard it. The question of genocide is being resurrected, and I'm not one to say let's bury it, because I have no reason to do that. If there is something that needs to be said and needs to be had, then let's have it. But what is the purpose behind it? What agenda are we setting, and what narrative are we now fabricating in terms of, oh, this is going to happen, like the sky is falling,
You
the
mean-
end is near, it's inevitable,
Right.
Ethiopia is going to bleed to death, or people are going to, so
the framing of the conflict zone, it's still there, lingering.
right. So since we're saying, and really, really the thing that I find very captivating is getting Ethiopia dead wrong. We do not want Ethiopia to be gotten dead wrong again.
At all.
Yeah.
That's just not appropriate.
Right.
It doesn't work for any country. If the US was to be gotten dead wrong, I don't think the US will be happy. I think there will be so much effort. Africa has been gotten wrong for such a long time. Not just Ethiopia, in general Africa. What I'm trying to do is, Ethiopia never had a chance to really, once again, run in front of the narrative. It seems to be running behind it and always trying to debunk or trying to say, no, that's not what's happening. Excuse me, I'm going to quote a sentence, a statement from your book. And once we talk about that, maybe we can wrap up today's discussion, but we will hopefully continue to have this discussion. You had stated on page 139, for making Ethiopia liable was a free for all.
Yeah.
Like anybody and everybody who could speak, who can get in front of a camera, whether it's social media, whether mainstream media, whether it's world propaganda, you name it, anyone and everyone.
You just throw everything in the kitchen sink, and if it doesn't hit, doesn't matter. You just keep throwing whatever you have got. There's no follow-up, no apology, no retraction. It's very unusual, right? Usually, if you say 800 people were mowed down in the central square of Axum and then eaten by a hyena, wow, and you splash this on newspapers all over the world, and then it turns out to be nothing of the sort happened, right? Oh, well, but there was something else that happened, so it kind of looks like it, and we exaggerated a little bit, but forget about that. We feel vindicated. Come on. How can there be no follow-up? Why was this source that you got that was lying in your face? Shouldn't this journalist suffer some kind of consequences? No. She just carries on doing other atrocity stories, always based on anonymous witnesses. You just have to take her word for it. Right? She just continues, and it's always our duty to debunk these stories, right? Sometimes it's impossible. Of course, they learn how to, you cannot prove a negative, right? You cannot always debunk that this did not take place, especially when it's an anonymous witness, but you can point to inconsistencies, and we do that again and again. And no, we just have to trust them again and again. Even when we caught them lying again and again. It's just unbelievable.
Blind trust them.
Yeah. It's just like Cara Anna. I interviewed her. I went undercover. I pretended to be a Chilean film student who wanted to filmatize her lie about what happened in Axum. Did you read that? Yeah, I think it's kind of amusing. Yeah,
I read that, yeah.
And she won't stand by the story completely, but she also won't say, oh, actually, that's not what happened. So she sort of, it's just unbelievable. And Associated Press, no comments. I tried to get them to talk to me. No, they're not interested. They just ignore it. They think they can get away with it. So that's what I mean. It's a free-for-all. You can just throw anything you like. Lucy Casa, the famous atrocity storyteller from Addis Ababa with a Tigrayan background, she wrote, for example, along so many things that you just take her word for it, right? And she became a huge star. She wrote that now Gondar University was digging up dead bodies in Volkait, or what the Tigrayan ethnic nationalists call Western Tigray. And these were like over 30-year-old dead bodies that were killed by TPLF for insisting on their Amhara identity. And she wrote that, according to some anonymous witnesses, no, really, these were Tigrayans who'd been killed a year and a half ago. And Gondar University, indignant, wrote a letter to BBC, come and see, you can come and, we invite you to come and see. This is crazy, we'd have to be conspiring at least 40 people working on this to pass off a 1.5-year-old body as 30-year-old body. It doesn't make sense. Come. And BBC, they published the letter from Gondar. They definitely got cold feet. They never published anything by Lucy Casa again, but no retraction. And still this story keeps popping up. BBC reported that there was this mass killing for being falsified by Gondar University. It keeps coming up, this story, all the time, because there's no retraction, there's no apology. So that's what I mean. It's a complete free-for-all. It's just a disgrace. They would never accept that with any other country than Ethiopia. It is really shocking, the lack of respect for Ethiopia. I'm not a Pan-Africanist. I'm not somebody who says which countries are to blame for everything. I'm not that kind of guy. But here, I have to say, it is a complete lack of respect by the powerful towards a poor nation. And what can I say? That's also why I get a lot of people who read my book from the extreme left. And they're not my kind of people, but they support me. They feel vindicated when they read me. And what can I say? Yeah, they're right.
Right. And you do talk about betrayal in your book. I think towards the very beginning, and that kind of resonated with us, and we talked about it in the first session when we first talked about this book. I mean, that betrayal is just out of this world. It's, I don't know if it's intentional. I can't say it is just intentional, but because for the lack of wanting to do due diligence,
Right, right.
It ended
This
up
is-
being a betrayal to the sovereignty of Ethiopia, is what I'm saying. Your
Yeah.
book is not one-sided. And that's why I'm saying, before anybody just take a line and say whatever, I suggest and I strongly recommend read the book beginning to an end, because it is, to me, pretty balanced. So it's not one-sided. It's not, Ethiopia is squeaky clean of certain things. It doesn't
Right,
say
right.
that. It's stating fact. What I'm trying to get at is, we will continue to hear these narratives. We will continue to see this agenda setting effort. So why am I harping lately and saying we need to be aware? And I'll say it again, we do not want Ethiopia to be gotten dead wrong again. Never. Let's bring this back to the listeners and to also decision makers and policy makers. It is easy to run with a headline. It's easy to stand behind a headline and put out a statement. We need to be very conscious about how we take these headlines and how we run with these narratives, and we always have to stop and ask, what is the purpose? What is the end result? What is the goal here? Who's saying it? What's behind it? Why would anybody say that? Things like that, to actually take time for us to do due diligence. And then, for what it's worth, for the policymakers, the people in Congress, and because it is public, I don't mind saying things like the Menendez kind of people who are now currently jailed. When we were trying to say, pay attention, something is wrong here, something is amiss here, and we've been sending emails and we've been writing letters and we've been hand delivering things to say, stop what you're doing because you really are going wrong about it. There was no ear to hear us. Look where they're at now.
Right.
I think that would be a prime example, case in time, of somebody getting certain things dead wrong. And that somebody's not, I'm pretty sure, where they would want to be. So what would be a message in just like 2-3 very direct statements from you as you think about this book? What message do you want to send to the citizens of Ethiopia? Because this is specific to Ethiopia. And also the Western world policymakers, the Western world media, the Western world propaganda kind of arena.
I think my experience during the war is, if I just got 10, 20 minutes with some important decision maker, I could usually convince them, right? I could persuade them. And a lot of the neutrals who read my book here, people that I know who don't know anything about Ethiopia, right? They've all been convinced. They've all been persuaded. Wow, you're right. This is shocking. How can this be true? But it is. Your evidence is very conclusive. So I think I've written a tool that's pretty good at persuading people. There are some people who are just so set in their views, they will not even read it, right? They will just skim through it and then they will criticize it in very general terms. But the people who are neutral, when they start reading it, they're all won over by this book. And it was not difficult for me to win them over by talking to them during the war. But daily life on an editorial board is, okay, we translate something from New York Times, not this guy Rasmus, who's probably been too long in Ethiopia, right? He started to sympathize too much with those Ethiopians. He's almost become Ethiopian. It's not good. That was kind of, if I only had 1 minute, that could be the reaction, right? Or maybe in the beginning when I was too emotional. But usually, if I got a little time, I could persuade people. I think the diplomacy is very different from the media, and we need to distinguish, because the diplomacy is very pragmatic. They want results, right? They don't want 125 million refugees from Ethiopia. Actually, that's the main policy priority right now. Is the main issue in rich countries now is immigration. So, for me, it's great to have some Ethiopians come and improve our economies and population. It's great. They're very good, hardworking people. So, but, for the most of the voters, no, as few as possible, right? So, usually they would like to get on with Ethiopia, And they can see that the alternative is much worse. They can see that none of these ethnic militias have any chance of ruling Ethiopia peacefully. So, yeah, let's distinguish between diplomacy and media, although they do influence one another, of course, especially the media puts pressure on the diplomats. So they cannot be too open sometimes about their support for Ethiopia. It becomes something, almost like shameful, like doing a deal with an autocrat, something like that. But they know deep down, a lot of the diplomats, they know that there's no alternative to working with the current Ethiopian government. Maybe support independent institutions, but also that you can't just push the Ethiopians around. You can't, even if you have much more money than them, you can't just push them around and expect them to sing to your tune always. What to say to Ethiopians? I think they just have to keep plugging away, being patient, explaining their situation. It doesn't help very much to get angry and emotional, unfortunately, although that's a very human way to respond. But no, we just have to keep patiently putting out the right information, showing that who are the ethnic chauvinists and who are the pro-coexistence forces. And Ethiopia has a long way to go, of course, to build a truly democratic culture. But that was the same in Western Europe, right? It took Denmark at least 100 years from, 60, 70 years from declaring a parliamentary democracy to actually having respect for people's votes and to have a truly free democracy. It took 70 years. So, it's not easy. It's not easy. And we shouldn't romanticize, of course, the political culture in Ethiopia, but nor should we demonize it And even though Ethiopian politics seems perplexing and different, it is the same ideals, basic ideals. And also the last thing, I hope I'm not jumping too much between subjects here, but the Westerners need to be better at seeing through all this grievance. They fall for it too easily. All this grievance stuff, it works very well. We have it in our own society. It's so fashionable to have all these grievances. But you have to be a bit more skeptical, because usually it's just half-truth or quarter-truth, or it's kind of besides the point, right? You need to look to the future. You can't always... if you want to look at the injustices of the past, it never stops, right?
Right.
Yeah, you have to look ahead and be equal and build a society with solidarity and equality going forward. And let bygones be bygones. I think most Ethiopians see it that way too.
Hermela.
Well, in this world that now is pushed more and more to be polarized, even we see it in Europe, we see it in the US, lots of people have been drinking of this Kool-Aid, very toxic, very inhuman, I would say. It would drag you down from the level of being human. Like I said earlier, the bias comes in handy, doesn't it? To justify this. In fact, that's what's spiraling out of control, this being polarized.
Right. So what can we do? What can we do to stop polarization?
Well, the little advice I would give is, at least as an adult, try to read between the lines. Don't just buy in this disinformation, misinformation, like it's truth. It's not truth.
Right.
It's manipulated truth.
But also, I think we have an obligation to listen to other people and to tolerate their different views. I know with a lot of TPLF supporters, I don't mind meeting them. I don't mind talking to them. I would love to. Actually, I learn a lot from that. Whenever I meet Tigrayans who have a different view than me about the war, I really want to have coffee with them and talk things through, and respect also their viewpoint. I don't think our disagreements over the war from 2020 to 2022 should prevent us from agreeing on charting a course ahead of unity in Ethiopia today. So yeah, you have to practice what you preach, right? So I don't want to participate in grievances, not even about the recent past.
What do we do with polarization? I mean, that phenomena is going to continue to occur in the world that we live in. But just listening to both of you, I was just thinking about the superiority complex has something to do with how we get polarized. Like, my thought process is superior over somebody else's thought process, or my view is superior over somebody else's, or, you know, whether it's ethnicity, age, gender, whatever it may be. For whatever reason, when you put yourself on a pedestal and start looking down, there's a problem. We do it this way, but you do it differently. It makes us superior because our way is right. Well, maybe Ethiopia sees its own way right. Maybe Africa sees its own way right. So I just wanted to throw that in. Sometimes polarization comes obviously because of political views, social statuses, economic stands and whatnot. But underneath that, there is that superiority complex that I see myself better than anybody else in terms of my political view, my social status, economic status, so many different ways. So in putting this together, we're going to continue to hear narratives being formed. We're going to continue to see agendas being set. We, the people, cannot continue to get any country, including Ethiopia, dead wrong. We have an obligation to take time, make an effort to stand on our own 2 feet and think for ourselves and not continue to be fed headlines. For those,
very true.
yeah, and for those who happen to be in certain places where they can make decisions, to look into one's own backyard, honestly, and not to be so high-strung about somebody else's way of doing things. Ethiopia is up and coming. Ethiopia is progressing. There is huge effort towards economic growth, economic development. Ethiopia is going to continue to do that. Is Ethiopia going to face issues? Absolutely, because we're moving towards democracy, and when we don't know what democracy is all about, when we don't know how to handle democracy, then it becomes all about narrative. That's why I want to keep talking about when we hear narratives popping out like a popcorn. That's not when we say, ooh, sky is falling. When we sense certain agendas are being set, that's not when we say, here we go again. We just don't follow headlines. And I'm saying this also to those people who put out those headlines to actually look into their own integrity, into their own consciousness, and say, what am I doing? At the end of the day, it is their legacy. This is going to be your legacy. Every one of us and the things that we put out there will remain to be our legacy. Right?
Right. A lot of my book is digging up things that embarrassing quotes for all these people, right? And there's nothing that I wrote or said during the war that embarrasses me today. Not really, even though I admit I was wrong in mispredicting the Western reaction to the war.
Right.
But on the whole, there's not much. I even said in October, when some of these Tigrayan ethno-nationalists, they were saying, they're going to kill every single Tigrayan. And I said, look, if this is going to happen, I will apologize in public, and I promise I will never, ever talk about Ethiopia in public again. I will bow my head down in shame. If there are going to be mass killings, Ethiopia liberates Tigray the way I see it. If that means mass killing of Tigrayans, I will bow my head in shame. I will apologize. And they will say, oh, but what is your apology good for if all our people are dead? Yeah, but it's not going to happen, right? So I said, this is what I will do. What will you do if it means peace? If Ethiopia prevailing militarily means peace? Right. No answer, right?
Right.
I feel vindicated. I feel calm that I was right all the time. If I had misread it, of course, I would be terribly ashamed. And another thing I've learned is don't take strong opinions on issues you're not really, really familiar with. I'm not gonna have opinions on the politics of Rwanda or Mali or any of these countries because I never lived there. I don't know them well. I never even been there, right? That's something else I've learned. Maybe in the past I had stronger opinions about, I don't know, Myanmar or whatever. I'm very careful now. If I haven't studied the situation very carefully, I don't want to have a strong opinion about it.
And I think there is a lot to learn from that, just from the statement that you've made. And I think it's the greatest thing one can say. I can stand behind my words 100%. This is why I'm saying the book, as far as I've read it, it comes across very balanced. It's not polished. It's not whitewashed. It's not just focused on one thing and one thing only. You've credited where
Right.
credit belonged. You've wronged where you saw the wrong. So it wasn't, this side and versus that other side. To
Right.
me, it came
And there's
to,
no sort of bad faith interpretations of other people's statements. There's so much of that. You see, like Jan Nussen, for example, there was a general saying, "Oh, Tigray has been punished enough," by which he meant has suffered enough under the TPLF. And Jan Nussen, I mean, "Oh, so you did want to punish Tigray, right?" That's just a bad faith interpretation of people, and it's all the time. It's really, yeah, it's poisoning the public debate, all this bad faith stuff. I try always to have a good faith interpretation, give people the benefit of the doubt. And then, because then your argument is also much stronger, right, when you do that.
So I just
Right.
want to be that voice in saying we need to take a step back, learn from history, learn from our
Right.
experiences. And here is one place, one resource. I'm pretty sure there are other things out there that we could look into, but at least to take a look at this and take what it is that we're learning and not
Right.
run with narratives. We need to be aware, we need to grow. This is, like I said, the Ethiopian community, whether it's people in Ethiopia, the diaspora, we're stepping into the political world in the recent years because of technology, right? We've not been
Right.
this involved and this immersed in the past however many years. Technology has allowed all of us, including the new notion of what democracy is all about, besides being told you can't go there, you can't speak this way, you can't breathe that other way. We're experiencing a level of freedom in terms of democracy, right? Freedom of speech and things like that. But if we don't know how it works and we don't take time to learn at least the basics of it, then it's gonna
Right.
create this kind of thing. So that's why I wanted to have this conversation, and I'm so grateful that you're here and you've given us enough time. Don't want to keep you too long. Hopefully this isn't the last time that we get to talk to you. For today, I think this is a great place to wrap up our discussion. Once again, grateful to the book. I've gotten a chance to read it. I will continue to read it. I encourage everyone, please go grab yourself a copy. You have, if you have access to Amazon, you can find it there. Then you can, I'm sure, find a way to contact him to find a copy. If you have Kindle, you can download it that way. You can buy it from Kindle and electronically read that.
Right, right. Yeah, that's my greatest reward is the appreciation of people like you. And if people don't have a credit card or something, I want to write me for some reason. If you write "Getting Ethiopia Dead Wrong" in one word at gmail.com, I will get the message. I can send you a free digital copy. I just want to be read, right? That's
Right.
the great reward for me is to have readers and to have
And-
appreciation and comments and changing minds is also very important. So please recommend it to the realm of diplomacy or especially, I mean, as a case study in African studies department, media studies, all these is kind of an interesting case study, I think, for all these university departments.
Absolutely. I was gonna
both
say
Africa
that.
studies and media studies.
Even for policymakers.
Right,
Absolutely.
right. I've had some people saying, why don't you make a list of recommendations, right? Because policymakers don't have time. They just want to jump to the list of recommendations. But it's not
No,
really.
they've gotten used to too much of that.
Yeah. I didn't write like a manual or something, right? I wrote a case study of something that happened that should outrage everybody, or at least make people think for themselves about
Yeah.
how is this even possible, right?
Senator John Kennedy wrote a book recently. Let me tell you what you just said towards the end. People wanting you to give them like the condensed version of like the stuff, right? And instead of taking time to read it and grasp it for themselves, why don't you just create a list and tell them what page to go and read. Okay, so he talks about how that has become detrimental to the political world or the work within the Senate itself. When people are looking at a 1 page or 2 page of a bill prepared by their staffers, and they go on the floor and go off of that. So the whole bill could be pages and pages and pages long, but what they're looking at is a condensed, summarized portion of that bill that a staffer actually put together. And somebody got in trouble for misquoting the wrong person because staffers did a Google search of somebody's name and just presented it, and somebody was somebody misspoke. Let's just say that. So he talks about how important it is for anybody, especially policymakers, decision makers, to really do the work themselves, to educate themselves, to be fully informed. He tells it in a very interesting way. Like, wow, I can't believe he actually could say that type of thing. And one of the things that grabbed my attention as you were talking about your book is Larry saying that staffers providing people that condensed version of a huge bill that impacts a country and nation, whether it's local, whether it's international. And as I was listening to him, I was thinking this is what was happening when we were fighting the resolutions after resolutions that was coming out for Ethiopia. So for anybody who's looking for a shorter version of your book, my suggestion is take time and read.
It's maybe 80,000 words or something, so it's like a short novel. It's not like a lot of illustrations.
Hopefully we'll continue to have this kind of dialogues. Thank you both, Rasmus and Hermela, for being here. I look forward to continuing to have dialogues, and I'm so grateful that you've joined Independent Voice today in this kind of discussion. And thank you so much for every effort you put in this book, from the title itself to bringing life and truth to what was wrong is wrong, what is right, and for us to take this as a lesson. I hope universities will have this book in their libraries. Also in Ethiopia, I hope they will have it in their libraries. There is a huge and beautiful library that is also built recently. Hopefully they will have few of them there, because this is history. This is something that we can all learn from. And then also in my own vicinity here in Washington, D.C., certain people will give it a chance to flip through it and read it. I am hoping that Senator John Kennedy can find it, quite honestly, because it aligns with some of the things that he also stood by during the war. So hopefully that is somehow it gets into his ears and he will find a copy of this book. With that, thank you so much for today and spending time together. Look forward to another conversation. This has been Independent Voice, and I'm Mame, Rasmus, and Hermela. Thank you so much for your participation.